Good afternoon, Excellencies, dear fellow observers and friends from the African Union, ECOWAS, ISA, Carter Center, USAID, as well as from the ECC and LEOM. Dear journalists, thank you for coming in such high numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everyone at this second press conference on the second preliminary statement. As it was already said on the previous occasions, the European Union is observing these elections following the invitation of the government of Liberia. And at the end of August, the EU deployed an independent election observation mission to observe the 2023 general elections. It shows the EU's continuous commitment and support for reinforcing the democracy, rule of law, political dialogue, and peace in Liberia. Let me, in the first place, express my gratitude to the Liberian authorities for the invitation and congratulate all Liberians involved in the election process, in the first place, the voters themselves, who exercised their right to vote in a very high numbers, and by that way made the democracy happen. This is a vivid proof of the vitality of your democracy. Let me also thank all the actors of this electoral process for receiving us, taking the time and sharing with us their impressions, your impressions, concerns, and thoughts. We were able to meet both runoff contestants, representatives of political parties, civil society, religious and traditional leaders, and last but not least, the media representatives. Let me also congratulate all those who were involved in the election day operations, in the National Elections Commission and polling staff working at all levels of election administrations who, despite the challenges and obstacles, well managed the election day operations. A significant number of citizen and international observers continued their activities in between the rounds and on runoff election day, contributing to the transparency of the process. In this respect, I wish to mention our excellent cooperation with our partner organizations from the African Union, ECOWAS, and ISA, as well as national observer groups such as LEOM and ECC and other observation groups. Let me also thank the EU delegation in Monrovia and the EU member states for their support to the mission. Let me underline that our election observation mission is present in Liberia as mentioned since the end of August in the capital and in all 15 counties of Liberia, meeting all stakeholders and reporting back. So our preliminary statement, which we are presenting today, is based on facts and evidences directly observed by our observers in the field. Importantly, a group of 7 members of the European Parliament joined the mission, and Minister Garcia Margallo will later share with you their impressions. As I told you on previous press conferences, the mission observes and makes an analysis of the whole electoral process, including the legal framework, electoral administration, voter and candidates registration, the campaign environment, including in media and social media, and the election day, but also tabulation of the results at the tally centers, as well as complaints and appeals process. So it's not uniquely the E-Day observation. As mentioned by your press officer today, it's the day when the EU election observation mission will present the preliminary statement. This statement should be read in conjunction with the first preliminary statement published on 12th of October. The main message. On 14 November 2023, Liberians participated in a runoff to elect the president for the next 6 years. These were the first post-conflict general elections solely organized by the Liberian institutions. During the interval between the two runs, the campaign was largely peaceful and low-key. However, tensions grew towards the end of campaign and isolated incidents of election violence were reported days before the election day. The National Elections Commission efficiently managed the preparations of the second round and improved its public communication. Freedom of press and of opinion continued to be respected, but state-owned media offered most of their news coverage to the incumbent. Closer to the runoff date, derogatory speech, inflammatory language, and misleading messages in social media intensified. While political freedoms of candidates and supporters were largely respected, the use of state resources by the ruling party and the lack of oversight of campaign finance regulations by the NEC continued to distort the level playing field. Now let me describe 5 main areas which we observed, starting with the election administration. So as mentioned, NEC efficiently managed the election preparations for the second round and improved its public communication, though the atmosphere of low stakeholders' confidence remained. In an effort to reduce procedural irregularities in the runoff, the NEC organized refresher training programs for lower-level personnel. Their civic and voter education campaign remained low-key, with more in-person community-based activities observed about a week before the election day. A significant number of citizen and international observers continued their activities in between the rounds and on runoff election day, contributing to the transparency of the process. A few days prior to election day, serious claims aiming to undermine the integrity and credibility of domestic and international observer groups were raised by both contesting sides. The EU Election Observation Mission regrets that such accusations took place targeting the observer groups. On the campaign, few words. The campaign was largely peaceful, however, tensions grew towards election day and isolated incidents of election violence were reported. Parties could freely exercise their rights to freedom of expression, assembly, and movement. Civil society, traditional and religious leaders were active in their support of a peaceful election process. The EU Election Observation Mission observed mainly small-scale campaign activities. The lack of enforcement of campaign finance regulations continued to fail to ensure transparency and a level playing field. CDC has had significantly more financial resources than the Unity Party. The EU Election Observation Mission observed directly the use of state resources by the incumbent in terms of government and local government staff campaigning during working hours and the use of government buildings and vehicles. In some instances, government institutions were actively involved in the campaign. Few words on the media, something which might be interesting to most of you in this room. Freedoms of expression and of the press continued to be respected, but political patronage, low salaries, and a lack of diversified funding streams continued to negatively impact on the quality and diversity of the messages transmitted to the public. Out of the time attributed to political contestants by state-owned broadcaster, Liberia Broadcasting System, which operates radio station ELBC and television channel LNTV, 70% and 80% respectively was allocated to the CDC. UP received just under 5% of airtime on NLTV during the prime time hours. On the digital space and social media, The campaign in social media was dominated by narratives on endorsements and mutual accusations of betrayal and tribalism between politicians, as well as public figures supporting either CDC or UP, including widespread derogatory speech. The increased instances of divisive language from regional political actors attacked different groups of society, for example, religious groups, inciting unnecessary tensions across the country. Facebook was the most used platform for online political discussions and campaigning for the runoff, marred by instances of dehumanization, rhetorics, and fabricated content which targeted electoral contestants and media figures. On this aspect, positively, Liberian leading fact-checking initiatives verified messages on electoral fraud and electoral-related violence, also using their networks in the regions which facilitated voters' trust in the electoral process and their more informed choice. On the complaints and appeals, while only one appeal was filed for the presidential race, some 60 post-election complaints were filed at NEC magistrates across the country, alleging malpractices and irregularities related to the senatorial and House of Representatives elections. Many complaints were dismissed for lack of evidence, while several others for lack of legal standing. Several hearings at NEC level are still ongoing. On the election day, our 85 election observers reported from 326 polling places in rural and urban areas in all 15 counties of Liberia. We were in 5.5% of all polling places, which is which represents quite a high number of high number of places we visited, a solid sample. The EU election observation mission's observers assessed the election day as generally calm, although a few incidents involving physical violence occurred across the country. They also assessed the conduct of the voting process in observed polling stations as very good. The polling proceeded smoothly and orderly and was assessed positively as well organized in the overwhelming majority of polling places observed. Voting procedures were generally followed, with only few procedural irregularities noted, primarily caused by confusion over the inking procedure. In general, the procedural irregularities were reduced in the runoff, also thanks to a refresher training program for the polling personnel organized by the NEC. The voting process was marked by numerous instances of party agents keeping track of voters' data, raising concerns over undue influence or intimidation of voters. The counting was mostly conducted efficiently, accurately, and in a transparent manner, but important reconciliation steps were often omitted in an effort to speed up the process. Currently, our observers are following the process at the county tally centers across the country. Up until now, this process is assessed mainly positively as transparent, efficient, and orderly managed. We will continue to observe the tallying until it's finalized. We also follow the handling of complaints and appeals. The mission will remain in the country until 10th of December to follow all the remaining steps of this electoral process. After the completion of the process, the EU Election Observation Mission will present to the authorities and to the public opinion the final report with recommendations on how to improve future elections in Liberia. Thank you very much for your attention.